Security, this is the opposite of national security. U.S. interests, this is the opposite of U.S. interests. Israeli security, it's the opposite of Israeli security. All we do is take a step closer to the end of the world.
So I've been following Jeff Sachs a long time and his foreign policy views, and I've never seen him as distraught as he is now over the recent war that's broken out between Israel and Iran. Let's get his take on how complicit the U.S. is, what the stakes are here, and how the Trump administration's responding. So let's watch and let's react. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
How do serious diplomats like our mutual friend, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, view this? Marco Rubio said on Thursday night when the bombs first started falling, the United States knows nothing about this. Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, yeah, we're behind it and the Iranians deserve it. Donald Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia, the lying and deception. How do serious diplomats view this? How will they view dealing with the United States from and after these events?
Of course, serious diplomats don't believe a word that the United States, Britain, France, or just about any other close ally of this cabal actually says. The Russians have gotten over that idea a very long time ago. The Chinese have gotten over it a long time ago. We attack them through projection all the time, saying they don't tell the truth. All they hear is lies from the United States. I just went to a UN Security Council session last week, at the end of the week, after Israel bombed in an unprovoked manner Iran, and after it had assassinated many scientists and many of the military top leaders 3 days before the next round of negotiations was to take place. And I listened to the US and the other so-called Western diplomats. The ambassador of Denmark was so disgraceful, idiotic, that she didn't mention in her remarks that Israel bombed Iran. All she did was threaten Iran. Of course, the French, the British talked about Israel's rights to self-defense. And the United States representative at the Security Council basically said, if any American is harmed in this, we will destroy Iran. I'm paraphrasing. But
yeah, I'm so glad these two are making the connection between how the dealings of the Trump administration and Netanyahu are with Iran on the rest of the world, including powers we want to negotiate with. Russia is the chief among them. How would Putin think that we're anywhere near to be a trustworthy partner, meaning my government, I shouldn't say we, if this is how we deal, where there is an underhanded sneak attack where it seems like to some extent, at least for some days, Trump was luring the Iranian ministry into believing that he genuinely wanted a deal over nuclear weapons curtailments when secretly they were planning this strike with Israel and luring them into a false sense of security. What does that do to other powers in the world we're trying to negotiate with? I don't see how you can trust the United States in any regard. Sachs is right. It's all lies.
It was thuggery. That's what is called diplomacy these days. This is actually alarming because diplomacy is a set of tools to keep the world from being destroyed. It's not a game. It's not a show. It's not a clever statement on Truth Social. It's not a clever witticism made standing outside the UN Security Council. It's actually a set of survival tools, especially in the nuclear age. Now, that idea that diplomacy is serious is very much debunked a lot of people would say, Sachs, you're an idiot. You're naive. You're a fool. It's all about power. But in fact, survival is not all about power. If it becomes all about power, we will not survive. It has to be about cooperation, understanding, enough truth-telling that if it's 4 days before you're to start the next round of negotiations, you don't create mass assassinations the third day before the negotiations are about to start, and then chortle about how wonderful that is. You don't say, yes, we want to negotiate, but if you don't capitulate entirely, we will destroy you, typically in big, bold letters with exclamation points.
Yeah, that's right. That's the new form of diplomacy in Washington, is saber rattling and using coercion, striking first and asking questions later, saying, hey, come to the table or we're just going to kill you, making threats to the supreme leader, telling Tehran to evacuate. This whole ruse that it was ever about the nuclear weapons program is just crazy, because Tehran doesn't have any of the nuclear facilities for nuclear enrichment, even that's done for the nuclear power that citizens use, that everyone uses, that's helpful for the economy, that no one denied at one point that Iran was able to have that until partly through these negotiations where, the Trump administration seems to have flicked a switch. And I think that is really the most representative moment through which we knew that they were going to go through with supporting this attack rather than actually diplomacy, is when they shifted it from no nuclear weapons program to no nuclear power program, no nuclear enrichment. You can enrich uranium. Iran's compliant in that. Some people say they've enriched it at too high of a percent than what's allowable, but I'd certainly skirt that edge too if I had Israel and the United States trying to overthrow me for like 40 or 30 years. And the U.S. did overthrow Iran in 1953 by the CIA anyway. So that's where we're at. This is what figures for diplomacy again. It's the same old neocon tricks. And, a lot of people took the bait that Trump was not going to be a neocon. He certainly raked the neocons over the coals throughout the campaigns, both of his three presidential campaigns, actually. And in the last days, he spent them, just trying to destroy neocons like Liz Cheney. So we're still seeing the same foreign policy play out regardless of presidential occupant. I've seen that basically my entire life. And frankly, it sucks. I'm sick of it. It's not America first. It's America last and Israel first.
Attached. Thuggery is not survival. Thuggery is thuggery. And there's a difference, actually, of underworld behavior and the behavior that we actually need for survival. I know it's a little quaint, the idea that there's actually honesty, follow through, that negotiations really mean negotiations, that we have a UN charter. I know it sounds all very quaint, but it's actually the undergirding of survival. And we are sliding, absolutely sliding rapidly now to the unprecedented world war in which it's a war with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I hate to say I agree. Very eloquently said. Diplomacy is related to survival. It's not all about power. Hey, I like it that my country has more power. Perhaps that will make me safer, at least in terms of nuclear weapons. But certainly we know from the lessons of history that empires have gone out, expanded, and then collapsed abruptly because of that expansion, because of how it affects daily life, how it curtails the liberty of the people, how it destroys their money through inflation or taxes used to finance these crazy excursions. This same thing happened to the Mongols and Alexander the Great and Rome and countless other empires throughout history. And the U.S. is in that stage. We are in the empire stage. If we were in the Roman system, I think the Republic's over, and we're at least several emperors into the mix here. So I think Sachs is right.
Yesterday, I interviewed a friend of yours, Professor Mohammad Marandi in Tehran, just an hour before the following happened at a television station in Tehran.
If you hear the voice of an invader on the homeland, it is the voice of an aggressor against truth and justice. What you observed, the sound you heard, is the murky, dust-laden voice of the studio.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
That, of course, was the Iranian state television being destroyed on air.
This is terrorism. There's no other way to say it. It's a preemptive strike. It's a strike of aggression that Israel launched this. And all that rhetoric about Israel has the right to defend itself, I heard that after this strike happened. But no one says Iran has the right to defend itself. It's always Israel first mentality to the bitter end, and it's disgusting.
By Israeli missiles, obviously.
With Trump then thereafter saying much, much worse is to come. Much worse is to come. We demand total capitulation. What is this, Star Wars?
It is almost, it is barnyard-like. How is this viewed in Beijing, in Moscow, in India? How do other great countries in the world view this? Well, let me restate the question, Professor Sachs. Who would trust the United States in any significant negotiation after this?
That's the question.
These negotiations, of course, not only on life and death issues of war and peace, but even on quotidian issues like tariffs. There is no trust because the U.S. has no sense. Trump is an extreme case, but it's a general pattern. No sense of honor or responsibility for fulfillment of one's word in a treaty. So I think everybody understands that what's called transactional is less than transactional. It means the immediate moment. An agreement is not a binding agreement. The full faith and credit means nothing because there is no faith and there is no credit to this. So everybody in the world right now, vis-a-vis the United States, is improvising. The Europeans in their absolutely pathetic way, which is, I think Trump loves. It's like watching the vulnerable mice scurrying around among your traps. He's playing games with them, and they allow themselves to be played with.
And certainly we've seen this happen time and time again. The U.S. got Gaddafi to disarm, to dismantle his infantile nuclear weapons program. And then you saw what happened to him. He got couped in a U.S.-led NATO coup. And meanwhile, North Korea actually gets a nuke, and they can't really be regime changed. I mean, there's been flirtations with that, bellicose language from time to time in various administrations. Bush Jr. said that they were part of the axis of evil. There's been several kind of allusions to regime change there, but it's not on the table. It's only the countries that don't have it. So there's unlimited incentive for all these countries around the world, whether you think they're totalitarian or despotic or not, to acquire nuclear weapons. And you really can't blame them if they try, I think, at this point. So to answer his question, the U.S. isn't trustworthy, and Putin certainly can't be thinking the U.S. is trustworthy if he ever thought that. And actually he did. Putin actually started out relatively pro-U.S. and pro-West, and that trust generally disintegrated over time, and especially after the U.S. bombed Sarajevo and tried to enact a regime change operation in Syria, several waves of NATO expansion, countless reasons not to trust the U.S. prior to this. But this really seems to seal the deal. I think it jeopardizes any kind of peace agreement in Ukraine, certainly.
China's extremely different. China, of course, knows that it is invulnerable to a U.S. attack because that would lead to the destruction of the United States. It doesn't want to put that to a test. China is an ancient civilization, and it has civilizational depth and status, and it basically doesn't respond to the minute to this. Again, I can't use the word I would use, but to this show that is underway right now. But it tries to create some sense in the midst of all of this of stability. It refers daily to the UN Charter and to the need for multilateralism. It's a valiant attempt, actually.
So Sachs is much more of a globalist than me, pointing a lot of his political beliefs to the international community and what they desire of the world for stability, to avoid war, etc. I'm just an America First guy, but in the truest sense. And I don't mean that I'm connected to the Trump campaign. I mean U.S. only. That the U.S. should get out of these foreign operations and foreign theaters. It doesn't benefit us regardless of what the UN Security Council thinks, or the World Bank, or the WEF, or whatever other global organization you want. And I'm not knocking Sachs. He has great, his beliefs about foreign policy generally align with mine almost completely. So I'm not knocking him for that. I'm just saying that even if you don't believe in the globalist agenda for peace, or what should be done with Israel, or how to view Netanyahu, just from an American perspective here, this doesn't benefit the taxpayer in my community. It doesn't do anything to help your child be educated or set up something for your future, preserve your livelihood, strike out in entrepreneurial endeavors. It doesn't do any of that. So regardless if you root this in internationalism or localism, it's a bad idea for the U.S.
Most countries of the world, of course, want that. But yeah, the U.S. has everybody scurrying around, but now the time horizon for decision making has been reduced to minutes, and that by itself means that we're at the very edge of nuclear war. The doomsday clock that I often refer to is at 89 seconds to midnight.
I think that's actually as close as it's ever come, and that represents how likely it is for a nuclear war to break out. I don't think it's gotten that far, even in the highest heights of the Cold War. Maybe during the Cuban Missile Crisis it was close, but I think it's actually closer, the people that study these things and calculate these things.
Attack Russian strategic bombers, you get closer. Make a murder assault on Iran, you get even closer. Everyone wants to play games. By the way, not everyone. I'm talking about this tiny, tiny cabal that has our lives in their hands. There's no such thing as any public scrutiny of foreign policy at all, anywhere, by the way. Right now, this is a small group of people that hold the fate of the world in their hands. And we had a Constitution of the United States that aimed to do something different, but it's completely in shreds.
Chris, do you?
Yeah, that's so true. And even the Democrats are not destroying Trump right now, raking him over the coals over this whole thing. They rake him over the coals and try to just disparage him and for doing anything else based upon his eating habits or how he dances. There's been stories written about that, about how, loathsome his personal dealings are with people, his personal relationships are. They have problems with all of that. And the Russiagate hoaxes and January 6th and all this nonsense that the political opposition has just tried to destroy him politically over, but never starting a new war, never playing a part in starting a new war, never allowing Netanyahu to dictate U.S. foreign policy, which that's about the biggest thuggery I can imagine, is allowing your foreign policy to just be subject to the desires of a much smaller country that you bankroll. That's what we're getting out of this presidency, and the Democrats won't attack him for it. So a few of the Republicans have. Thomas Massie, Rand Paul. I shouldn't say all the Democrats. Certainly you won't see Schumer and Pelosi do that. I think that AOC is actually, weighed in on this. I think that Omar may have, Tlaib, some of those voices that, are generally anti-war. AOC is not, but some of them are, but those are a few voices amongst a big sea of Democrats that couldn't care less about this. They'll just try to, disparage Trump over everything else but war.
Have the full screen of the tweet from the senior senator from South Carolina two or three
Oh,
words.
great.
I don't want to repeat it. There it is.
Here we go.
When this happened on Thursday night, just what you said, it's a game to him. Game on. Pray for Israel. Lindsey Graham. Where do you think?
Most despicable person in U.S. politics, I'll say.
But he
Amen.
plays golf with and whispers into the president's ear. So this is very dangerous since Donald Trump appears to be believing whoever he spoke to last.
Yeah, if you have Keith Kellogg and Lindsey Graham around you constantly, Mike Waltz around you, Marco Rubio around you, what do you think is going to happen? You're not going to go the non-interventionist route in any theater, literally any of them, if those are the people around you surrounding you. And he's pushed away Tulsi Gabbard and what she said about Iran's nuclear weapons program, the non-existent one, the one there's no proof that they've started back up since 2003. But we're just going to go along with the neocons, the Mark Levin, who came to visit me in the days prior to this, convincing me to strike Iran. It's just crazy. This is nonsense. It's America last, and Trump betrayed a lot of people. A lot of dissident supporters that favored him are not happy right now, and it's clear to see why Sachs is right.
Do you expect Trump to authorize some sort of U.S. military involvement, which God only knows how it's going to end up? We have 90,000 troops on the ground within striking distance of Iran missiles. Ritter says they're not even infantry. They're support troops. They're sitting ducks.
Well, I think it's likely that the U.S., under Trump's commands right now, will escalate and that this war will continue to escalate. It has been expanding for 30 years. The war is now raging across a 4,000-kilometer expanse from Libya to Iran. So nothing has put down any of this conflict. Security, this is the opposite of national security. U.S. interests, this is the opposite of U.S. interests. Israeli security, it's the opposite of Israeli security. All we do is take a step closer to the end of the world. And then, I'm sorry to say, I get emails from fundamentalists who say, read the sign of the times, Professor Sachs, the end of the world is coming, as in the prophecies. Well, I have a different approach, which is that we as human beings should be working towards avoiding the end of the world.
Amen. That's what I'm here for, too. I'm anti-war and certainly passionate about it. I'm a dissident. I believe entirely with what Sachs said there at the end. The U.S. foreign policy regimen is total thuggery. It's so far into that direction. Throughout my entire lifetime, it's hard to even quantify it sometimes. It's literally, I was born, and as long as I've lived, there's been war after war after war after war in the 90s that they call peacetime. Bill Clinton, bombed Afghanistan, did targeted bombings in Iraq, did targeted bombings in, I think, Sudan. You had Somalia, you had the Balkan Wars, and that was peacetime in the U.S., by the way. And that's what we call peacetime because relative to all these crazy regime change operations and proxy wars, I guess it was, but that's the sad case. And I agree with Sachs. We need to use diplomacy. The U.S. is known for using diplomacy from its earliest days. We've stayed out of so many wars. John Quincy Adams was a master at this as Secretary of State. He masterfully stayed out of a larger war with Florida after Andrew Jackson had invading it by offering to buy Florida. And the Adams-Onis Treaty passed, and that's just one example. But there are others involved too. In the quasi-war with France, that was an on-again, off-again series of naval clashes. Essentially, it was settled by the 1800 Convention. And thankfully, that ended that war. There's been other examples, too. The U.S. needs to use diplomacy to settle existing wars and to avert wars. And you have to get ahead of the war propaganda, because that's what we're seeing play out right now. The weapons of mass destruction are back, except for substitute weapons of mass destruction for Israel cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. which they don't have. Our own director of national intelligence says they don't have. Mossad says they don't have. MI6 says they don't have. And our DNI Tulsi Gabbard, who Trump handpicked, said there's no evidence they've even started up that program since 2003. So that's where we are, sucked into a new war. If you were a supporter of Trump for reason that he was better on foreign policy in terms of evading wars, staying out of the affairs of the world, I think you're pretty disgruntled right now. I wasn't as hopeful on that as regard as some others. I'm not trying to gloat. Nothing makes me sadder about that. I wish that I was wrong and he did turn out to be a true non-interventionist in accordance with much of his rhetoric during the campaign, by the way, but he is not. But I do want to hear from what you guys think. Is U.S. foreign policy total thuggery? Is it the diplomacy's total thuggery? What does the U.S. need to do to stay out of this? What can they do that's potentially on the table that'll get us out of this? Let me know in the comments below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, consider becoming a YouTube member or Patreon patron. I would really appreciate that support, and it supports the channel greatly. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.